Here's the final product. Wow. Wow. It's kind of loud. It's just kind of a noisy boy, I guess. Noisy boy chain tensioner. Oh. Whoa. A marvel of engineering. So I'm a little bit scared.
What's up, bubbies? Welcome back to the channel. So the other day I was working with the BBSHD, the mid-drive. So I got the BBSHD on my bike, my mountain bike, and then I had this problem. So like I've been having this problem with the chain tensioner on my BBSHD. So I'm going to show you the chain tensioner that I currently have, Amazon Simple. Okay, so this is the chain tensioner that I've been using so far. All right. So it goes onto your, it mounts onto your derailleur hanger on your bike, and then it's just, you kind of angle it, like you mount it onto the derailleur hanger, and then you angle it and kind of like pre-tension it against the chain, and then you fasten it onto the derailleur hanger with this big M10 bolt, right, this M10 screw, just like you'd normally hook on a derailleur, right? But the problem with this thing is like you pre-tension it and then you fasten it on there, but what happens is like the chain, you know, what I found is the frame can flex, right? So the whole bike frame can flex. So it's like if you pre-tension the chain all the way, right? And then so it's fully pre-tensioned, and then the bike frame is flexing, or sometimes even like if you pedal hard, or like a combination of things, like if you're pedaling hard and then the frame flexes, like this thing was just not working for me, right? It's not working for me because there's no spring. Like this thing, it's mounted statically, like it does not move, right? It's just a stationary chain tensioner. And I think it would work just for like pedaling and low power, but when you have the BBSHD on high voltage and, you know, like the chain is just like absolutely spinning like crazy, right? Like it's just really wild. So this thing is not working. And what happened with this thing was, so I got this thing in December last year when I built this bike, but what happened the other day was that like the threads on my derailleur hanger are just completely stripped out, right? So how this happened was, so how this happened to my derailleur hanger, it was this thing, right? And the BBSHD. So like when the BBSHD is going, like sometimes that chain is just going all over the place, and the frame flexes and it adjusts, it affects the chain tension. And so this thing, like over time, even if you kind of like Loctite it in there and whatever, like over time, this thing, like it will move, right? It'll move if you have it on the BBSHD like I do, right? And so I was looking at different chain tensioners and I was trying to find like what can we use that could work for this, right? Except, okay, so I was looking at something like this Surly singulator thing, but I can't even find them anymore, and I'm actually not sure if this thing, if the arm, that main body piece, I don't know if that's long enough to fit the large sprocket that I have on my rear wheel. So even something like this, like I don't think that something like this works. I don't know that there's really any product that exists that's a chain tensioner that's meant to mount on a derailleur hanger and that's compatible with like a huge rear sprocket. And the other thing about this rear sprocket on my bike is that usually when you have a cassette and you have your cassette gears, like you've got the small gears towards the outside of the frame, and then they continue getting bigger, you know, as you go into the frame, right? But so on my bike, how I've set it up is there's only one gear, right? I've converted the whole cassette free hub into just one gear. There's a bunch of spacers, and then there's just one chain ring that's right in the middle for a straight chain line, right? Except it's a huge chain ring, a huge sprocket, and it's not all the way in. Like on a normal cassette, you know, like that large sprocket is all the way to the left, in like towards the inside of the bike frame. It's the large sprocket is all the way over to the side, right? So when derailleurs adjust, when derailleurs are moving, they kind of like come down, but then they also go over, right? To be able to come down and like articulate over and to fit those large, huge chain rings. The derailleur, like, it's not easy to set up a derailleur as a chain tensioner for a large sprocket on the rear wheel, when that large sprocket has been spaced out all the way out, kind of like towards the outside of the frame, right? Like most derailleurs, like first they have to kind of come down, and then they kind of like start shifting inside, right? So what I'm trying to do, I don't know that anything exists. I don't know that any product exists that is going to work for this, but I found something. I found some inspiration on YouTube.
Hey everyone.
Okay, so I found this thing on the Trailbreaker channel on YouTube. So he's got 10,000 subscribers. Trailbreaker, he's right here. All right, so this good sir, my good friend here at the Trailbreaker channel, he's kind of been working on a single speed bike as well. So he did the same thing. He used a derailleur, and he doesn't even have a shifter hooked up to it. The barrel, you know, it's just tensioned right here, where the cable housing usually kind of goes into, right? So he's using a derailleur as a chain tensioner, but it's, you know, it hangs down, it's noisy, right? A lot of derailleurs don't have a clutch, so they don't maintain the chain tension. And so if you want to buy a derailleur that has a clutch, they're like $50. You know, like you can't just buy a Shimano tourney. They don't have a clutch. There's no spring inside of those that maintains the chain tension. So like if you want to use a derailleur as a tensioner, you kind of need a good derailleur, right? And it costs money, and it's just like overkill. Like, why would I buy a $100 derailleur with a clutch if I'm only using one gear and I don't even want to shift? Right, so I found this video, and he talks about the design a little bit, right, about how you might attempt to try and tension a chain. So let's just sit here, and we'll just like go through this super quick. 1.5.
Initially, I wanted to do something like this, just with a single pulley that could pull up the slack. And as you can see, even with the chain completely shortened as much as it'll go.
Right, so I'm just showing you the kind of like the reasoning behind the chain tensioner design here. So when you're trying to do a single speed, like, it's kind of hard to get the chain tension right. You have to have something to tension the chain. And as he's demonstrating here, like just one thing to kind of like pull the chain upwards and tension it, it always hits the chainstay, right? Like that's just the reality of trying something like that, is like pulling the chain up like that, it's always going to be hitting the chainstay, or at least in my case, it's definitely going to be hitting the chainstay, just like he's demonstrating here. So I can't just have one thing that's kind of pulling the chain upwards to tension it.
Room between the chain and the chainstay. And I didn't want to do something where you're pushing down on the chain, because...
So pushing down on the chain, that is kind of what this other chain tensioner was doing, right? This thing is, you hook it onto the derailleur hanger on your bike, and then you tension it downwards, so it's tensioning down on the chain, and then you secure it on there, just kind of stationary, and it's not supposed to move. But since this tensioner is held on to just in one spot at the derailleur hanger, and there's nothing else kind of like bracing it from twisting against the frame, that compressive force from this M10 screw holding it into the derailleur hanger is the only thing that tensions this thing, right? And then so all the threads stripped off of my tensioner. So we can't push down the chain like this, because it just ends up being like, the chain ends up hanging down a little bit more than you'd like, and it's just not very clean. And it's still, like, in my experience, even with that simple chain tensioner pushing down on the chain, like the chain was still, there was still a lot of like a lot of length in between that tensioner and the bottom of the chain ring, where the chain could still bounce around even when the tension was like, you know, like as tight as it could possibly go, right?
I just wanted it to be super clean and everything tucked up tight. So what I came up with was 2 pulleys mounted on a bar back off of the derailleur hanger, and I could create tension by how far apart I move the pulleys from each other.
Okay, so this is kind of, so he's kind of coming in here and he's kind of like, this is kind of like derailleur, you know, derailleur design 101 is like, well, to maintain the tension on the chain, you have to kind of like introduce some jockey wheels and kind of like an S shape to that chain to kind of like, you know, to kind of lengthen out the chain and increase that tension, right? Because like if your chain is too short, you're not even going to be able to wrap it around the chain rings and connect it, right? But chains, when you add a link to a chain, it's like a whole nother inch or whatever. So like you can only adjust your chain length in the increments, you know, and like you can only add and subtract links of the chain at a time. You can't, you know, there's no way to like finely adjust that tension. So just by adjusting the length of the chain alone is not enough. And you got to do something like this, where you run the chain through 2 jockey wheels to kind of add a little bit of length in there that will increase the tension on the whole chain, right?
And here's what the prototype looks like. So
let's look at his prototype.
The pulleys from each other. And here's what the prototype looks like.
Okay, so he's got a piece of aluminum flat stock that he's hooked onto the derailleur hanger, and then he's got 2 jockey wheels from a derailleur that are hooked onto the piece of aluminum, and he's kind of bent it so that it goes down right where you would want like a chain tensioner, and it's just like a very simple do-it-yourself chain tensioner.
So here's the prototype, and you can see the 2 pulleys.
Okay, so here it is from the outside view of the frame. You can see he's got just like a big bolt going into the derailleur hanger, holding this piece of aluminum flat stock there. It looks like it's about 1 inch by like 9 inches long on that aluminum. And then he's just got the 2 jockey wheels. He's running the chain through the jockey wheels. Seems simple enough.
It's mounted on the back side of the derailleur hanger for right now. I wasn't sure how to do this, that's why it's the prototype. But you'll see right here, it's mounted on the back side, and I have an M10 50 bolt that just kind of threads through, and there's a nut on the back side. It works, but there's some clearance issues with the hub right here, and I could trim that, but I thought it would be better to mount this on the outside. And
all right, so he's done kind of like a prototype, right, where he's got this thing, but it's mounted on the inside of the derailleur hanger, kind of like right in there by the hub. Not a whole lot of clearance. It sounds like he's having some issues with the aluminum clearing the hub. So what he's going to do is he's going to make a different one, mount it on the outside of the derailleur hanger, and then kind of bend the aluminum so that it bends back where you would want the jockey wheels and the chain line to be.
I could mount the bolt from the back, just have a nut on the outside that makes removing this on the trail easier, because in order to take the wheel off, I'd have to at least loosen this to be able to get the tension off of the chain. So I'm going to show you now how I'm going to go about building the permanent version.
So he goes through the whole process of like building, and you know, he's got some helpful stuff here about like what size drill bits he's using and all that stuff. So you can see he's kind of bending the aluminum here to get the profile that he wants. All right, so then this is the process of him designing the new version of it. So this is where he's deciding how to position these jockey wheels on it.
And I want this one to be as close to this as I can get it without making it bind. And I found that the distance between them, the closer they are, the more tension it puts on the chain, and the farther apart, the less. So
that's kind of a critical concept with this chain tensioner, is when you're adjusting, when you've got the chain going through those 2 jockey wheels and you're adjusting those 2 wheels, this distance of the 2 wheels from each other, that's how you can adjust the chain tension on this.
First, we're going to locate this one.
So he's kind of locating where to put the holes. So I'm just going to go do this. I'm going to try and do kind of like the same thing, except for on my bike. So this is where I got the idea from Trailbreaker. If you guys So if you guys want to do this and you want kind of like a more step-by-step guide about like the drill bit sizes and like each step along the way and the whole, this is like the original idea, right? So I'm giving full credit to this guy, Trailbreaker. Great idea. I like this. This really appeals to me because it's like I can go to the hardware store, get $15 or $20, you know, get $10-15 of aluminum and some bolts and stuff, and then hook some jockey wheels on it, and I don't have to spend $50 or like $100 on some kind of like a fancy chain tensioner that might not even work. You know, like, thing about a lot of single speed chain tensioners is that they're just not long enough. Like, they're designed to use a smaller sprocket on that back wheel, right? When you use single speeds most of the time. So the difference here is that I'm on BBSHD and the bike is geared extremely low and the sprocket on the back wheel is huge. So like it's a little bit different. Like a surly chain tensioner, like single speed chain tensioners, like it's gonna be kind of like questionable whether they're even long enough and designed in such a way where they can fit a huge giant sprocket on that back wheel, because that's not usually how single speed works, right? So I'm doing this because like it's kind of a weird thing to be doing. Not a whole lot of people set up a bicycle like this, and there's just not really like a good solution that exists for a chain tensioner on my bike without, you know, buying some kind of like an expensive derailleur and then not even using a shifter and shifting gears, right? And then so the other thing is that chain rings are thicker than the gears on cassettes, right? If you look at a chain ring and how thick a steel chain ring is, it's probably 2 or 3 times thicker than one of the sprockets on a cassette, right? So there's something to be said about the thickness of your chain rings versus a cassette. Like, chain rings are just thicker, right? So, alright. So let's go in the garage. I already bought all this stuff at Menards, a lot of the parts that I'm going to need at Menards. So we're just going to like go and cut some metal and drill some metal and hook some jockey wheels on it and jank it together and MacGyver together a chain tensioner for my high voltage BBSHD e-bike. So let's go, bubbies, let's do it. Alright, so here's the stuff I got at the hardware store, guys. So we've got some aluminum flat stock, so it's 1 inch by 3 feet, and then there's some that's 2 inch by 3 feet, and it's 1/8 inch thick. And I got a 10mm drill bit to drill out my derailleur hanger. That was about $7. Derailleur hanger's got a 10mm thing going on. Then you need a nylon locking nut, because you don't want your tensioner coming off. So I've got a 10mm nylon locking nut. So we're gonna drill this guy out. We're drilling out the derailleur hanger. Look at that. Oh, look how nice and smooth it is. So we drilled the threads out. Oh, there's the bolt. Look at that. Alright, so the first time I did this, I measured out 9 inches, but I ended up needing more like 13 inches in the end. So I'm just using this big saw thing to saw through this aluminum flat stock. Make sure you wear some eye protection or whatever. Be careful, boys. This is crazy. Alright guys, so like I said, I actually needed more like 13 inches for my bike and this huge sprocket on it, so this is kind of short. This is my first try. And so actually, I gotta put my wheel on the bike first before I put this bolt in, or else I can't get the wheel on. But so this is the first time I'm kind of like test fitting it on there. So here's a look at the bolt and how it clears the hub. I had to use a spacer. I couldn't fit on like the 7th gear from an actual cassette because the teeth would hit the bolt. And for this project, I'm using some janked up wheels from an old twisted it up Shimano tourney. You can also buy derailleur jockey wheels on Amazon. Get a couple of them for $10. Just make sure that like the hole in the center of them is the right size, and like you get the right bolts to go through the center of the jockey wheels and the right size hardware to work, because they come in different sizes, like 4, 5, and 6mm on the hole inside of the jockey wheel, so make sure you check that. Alright, so here I'm just kind of trying to figure out where do I want this first jockey wheel to go. And so one thing I'm taking into consideration is in the future, I want to try and fit a larger chainring on the bike back here again. So I want to keep that in mind. Like, I want to keep just a little bit of space if I want to put on a larger chainring in the future. Here's kind of, I'm measuring how far I need to kind of bend the aluminum here. So I'm measuring over the chainring. Alright guys, so I got this piece of aluminum out in the vise, and I'm just gonna bend it with my hand. We need to bend it about, we need to bend it so that this inside face over here that I'm touching my finger is gonna go this way. It's gonna bend this way, and then we're gonna, it needs to bend this way about 7/8 of an inch. And then this is about where the first wheel is gonna be, where I marked this right here. So this section, we want to go this way, and then bend it back straight, parallel with the chain, right? Okay, so I bent this a little bit. What I did is I just kind of like put my palm towards the bottom of it and just started kind of pushing on it with my body weight. So now it's come over this way, and it's about like right here, something like right here is where we want it to be straight again. So I'm just gonna go straight up from this point, and we're gonna want to like bend it back straight about 7/8 of an inch away from right here. Okay, so here's another view. We're gonna come 7/8 of an inch over to the right, and then go up, and we're gonna find wherever that is on here. And then we also want to account for the thickness of the metal and how far it's going to take to bend it backwards. Alright, so here it is. The first bend is done out of the vise. I'm going to bend it again right where this line is. Alright guys, so I'm working on kind of getting this thing straightened out here. I want to get this parallel with this. I think it's getting there. Maybe just a little bit more, and then we'll go back in the ground. So I made a prototype. I cut off about 9 inches, but the problem with this one is I had it on there, but it's just too short. And what happened here is like it wasn't long enough, and so the difference in what I'm doing and what the guy in that video was doing is I have a huge sprocket back here and he didn't, right? So what I found when I was using this shorter piece that I had just tried first, 9 inches, that wasn't long enough, okay? Because what happened was when I get this gear in here, and then you want this one back here, right? So it's like, it would be holding the chain up there. But then when I put, it was like, to get the proper S shape, right? So we gotta have this jockey wheel hooked on here somewhere. But then to get that proper S shape, I had to hook another jockey wheel somewhere down here. And since I have this huge sprocket back here, it just seems like I need this bar on my bike to be longer so that I'm able to manage these bigger sprockets back here. So it's gonna be like one pulley will be like back here. I want it like this way a little bit so that if I put a bigger chain ring on here, it's gonna be able to support that. So I'm not gonna put this jockey wheel like all the way back. Like I'm probably gonna have it forward a little bit, like up here, right? So that I can put a slightly bigger sprocket on here if I want, like 42, 46 tooth or 50 tooth or something, right? But then the problem that I ran into was when I have that one jockey wheel up here, then back here, to get, like, you only have a limited range of movement, right? And so there's like an inch where you can drill a hole for that first jockey wheel. So then you have to find a position where that makes sense. But then when I was trying to put the second one on here and complete like the S shape, it was like I was having to go further away on my bike with this second jockey wheel. I think because this sprocket on my bike is just so much bigger, right? So it was like when I had that 9-inch one, it was like I wanted this second jockey wheel to be further down this way, because otherwise like I couldn't find a spot where I could drill a hole for this wheel and drill a hole up here for this wheel, and then have them close enough where everything was like working right. So long story short, I have a much longer, this is like 13 inches right here on mine. I mean, it's almost coming up to my chain ring. I still have to bend this one, so it's gonna, that'll make it come back slightly. But yeah, so on my bike, I had to make this thing a lot longer, so it's gonna be interesting to see what happens. Okay, so I sat here and kind of thought about this a little bit more. So I think this wheel is gonna go somewhere back here, right? Because this is a 42 teeth sprocket, but I want to be able to put like 44, 46 tooth on there, maybe even bigger. So I think my first jockey wheel is gonna go like somewhere like this. And then the second one, I'm gonna need like, I'm gonna have to drill out like a whole slot down here so that I can adjust that one up and down this way. But potentially the other jockey wheel is gonna be like way down here, right? Because when you've got a jockey wheel like pushing this up right here, and then you want another jockey wheel like an S, like there's only, like you need quite a bit of length here to be able to hook both of these jockey wheels on here and complete that S in such a way where both jockey wheels fit on this metal piece and then tension the chain properly. So I gotta go bend this. Okay, so I'm gonna bend it right here on this solid line that I drew straight across. We're gonna bend it right here. Guys, I'm bending this piece once again, except it's a longer piece. So I've kind of got an idea of where I'm gonna have that jockey wheel. And what I do here is I just kind of like, just kind of like get the vise secure. And then I just kind of like push on it at the base of it. And kind of try and like go like this, go. But we want to bend it down here, right? So need both hands for that. All right, so then I've already established, like I want to bend this thing like almost to like this here. So you want to have a good idea of like how much you need to bend it as you're bending it. All right, bent it pretty significantly this time. Did a pretty sharp, almost like a 45-degree bend, because I want the length where this thing is like bending this way to be as short as possible, because we've got to attach a jockey wheel right here. So where I'm gonna bend it is probably bend it like right here or something, because I want this outside face of the metal to kind of be about right here. Okay guys, so as you're bending the metal and kind of fitting it on your bike, you can always put it back in the vise and bend it around more. Especially like if you have a little bend and it's hard to flatten out, like you can kind of just put it back in the vise and then just clamp down on it and then start reshaping it. Of course, you don't want to like bend it back and forth so much that it fatigues the metal, right? You want to bend it as little as possible. But it is possible to kind of straighten things out and unbend things when you make mistakes, because I've made a number of them. All right, so I've got the longer thing on here. So what I'm finding is I'm probably, since this chain ring back here is so big, like the chain is a lot lower down here. So I think my chain tensioner, it might have to come down a little bit. I don't think it's gonna be able to be as far up as that other guy's trail breakers. So I think the first jockey wheel is probably gonna go something like this. And then the second one is probably gonna have to go like all the way down towards the end of this, because it's a little bit difficult to find, because you gotta find a good spot for this one where it's nice and where it's close enough to the chain ring where it's kind of like keeping tension right here and it's getting onto your chain ring right. But then you also have to make that S shape and pull the chain back down and then have room over here to drill a hole and get one of these jockey wheels in here too. So I might have to offset the hole a little bit like upwards so that this wheel is a little bit higher. But then I also want to be able to like adjust it this way. So we're gonna cross that bridge when we get there. Let's first, I want to play around with this a little bit and think about it. And then I'm gonna drill the hole for this first jockey wheel. I'm pretty sure it's just gonna be like right around here. Guys, so then I got my jockey wheels. In this case, this is like it's a 5mm screw that goes through the jockey wheels. So we've got 5mm by 30mm metric hex cap screw. And then I've got a 5mm by 15mm fender washer. Okay, flat washer. And that's my jockey wheel. Right. I'm gonna put another fender washer right. Or do I need a fender washer right here? I don't think so. We can just put this through here like this. Okay, like this. And then I'm gonna put another fender washer over on this side, like that. And then get one of those little nylock nuts. Look at this MacGyver contraption, boys. Who needs Shimano anyways? Who needs them? So I'm just gonna copy these holes for the wheels onto this other piece of flat stock that's gonna be on the opposite side of the wheels. It's kind of like a chain guard. So we're just gonna drill these holes quick. All right, so now I'm gonna blast these with some spray paint quick. Check it out, bubbies. Here's the final product. Wow. Wow. It's kind of loud. So first thing I'm noticing, kind of loud. So you definitely want nylon locking nuts, because if they're not, those things will just roll straight off of there and the whole thing will fall apart. So nylon locking nut. You might even want to Loctite those. I probably will. Okay. But I put the chain guard on the back. Right, so check this out, boys. Look at this thing. Hardware store chain tensioner. Wow! It's making some noise right now. I'm using one of my hands to do the filming with my phone, but so I think it's something to do with like the vibration and this metal, so I think there may be some way to dampen this sound that we're hearing, but it's a little bit noisy right now. But it's working, so I don't know, it seems pretty cool. I like it so far. It seems like the noise is coming from down here, but I mean, I've tightened up those bolts, and I don't know, we'll figure that out later. I'm just pretty stoked about how it's actually working. Look at that. Have you ever seen anything like that, boys? Alright. So here's the true test. We gotta plug in the flipski. Here it is. Here is the chain tensioner on the single speed BBSHD. We've still got the same script on vest as I did yesterday for freewheeling. So I'm gonna hit the throttle and it's just gonna start going. Let's see how it does. Whoa. Whoa. A little loud. A little loud. But look at that, wow. It's going. The noise isn't as bad when I kind of hold it. But yeah. Look at that, the thing is incredible. A marvel of engineering. So I'm a little bit scared. A little bit scared. It's raining out today. So it's raining out today, so I can't really like go try it. Might paint it. I posted a short already, and somebody called me. It looks like a crackhead bike or something. So I am gonna paint this. We're gonna paint it black with like a little metallic sparkle to kind of match my Schwinn action. My Schwinn action. All right. But for now, there it is. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments. What do you think of my crackhead single speed chain tensioner that I built with janked up jockey wheels off of a twisted up Shimano tourney and some pieces of aluminum from the hardware store and a couple nuts and bolts. Like and subscribe, bubbies. Make sure to stick around because we're going to take this thing for a rip and see what happens. See what happens with it. Like and subscribe, bubbies. Peace out. Later.
It's just kind of a noisy boy, I guess. Noisy boy chain tensioner. Look at this, guys. It's my magnum opus. My best work yet. Hardware store chain tensioner. Now with the chain guard.